There we go. All right, everybody. Good evening, buenas noches. Thank you, everybody, for being here. So this is going to be the second Rainbow Coalition reading of Chapter 11 of Brother Kwame's book. And so with that, we'll go ahead and get started. I'll read a few chapters. If anybody wants to read along, just raise your hand. And then sometimes we get a lot of really good intel and comments in the chats. So I'll pause every now and then, throw my 2 cents in, read the chats, and then see what other comrades have to say or whatnot. With that being said, chapter 11 starts off as the Indiana Boys School. I was sick the whole ride to Logansport in the juvenile transportation van. The judge had sentenced me to 6 months in boys' school for assaulting Mr. Marshall. Although I pled guilty to the charge, I was still incarcerated. I was still incensed that I would be held accountable for my actions, while Mr. Marshall would never be held accountable for lying on me. Nevertheless, what was done was done. Up until this time, I had never done any real time. I did a few days in juvenile several times before, but never weeks or months. Now to be on my way to boys' school for 6 months, it was hard for my head to wrap around. That seemed like forever. I had many mixed emotions running through my head. I had imagined it being like a real prison populated by some of the toughest kids around the state. Some of the kids that had been to boys' school before told me all kinds of wild stories about what awaited me. The one that stands out in my mind is the numerous stories I heard about a guy named Big Panties. all the stories I heard about him were the same. He would knock you out and then suck your dick. I didn't know if I didn't know if those stories were true or not, but I figured if I ever came across him while I was there, I was going to try and make sure I punched first. When we got off of the transportation van, the staff at Logansport was awaiting us. As soon as we stepped off, the intimidation started. Everyone put your hands towards the everyone put your hands on the walk and face forward. There were a number of correction officers that greeted us when we got off the van. All of them had a no nonsense disposition about themselves and spoke very condescendingly to us. I could tell by their intimidation and introduction that I wasn't going to like Logansport at all. I'm gonna start there right quick because in terms of solidarity and transsectionality, a lot of the Berets, not just myself, but we do a lot of work with the Native American brethren, and everybody is now just learning about them residential schools, right? How the government forced these Native comrades to go to these residential schools and assimilate. It was forced cultural assimilation, right? They would cut their hair, they would make them learn English and so forth. And so it was a forced simulation. And whenever I hear about juvenile detention, a boys' home, girls' home, they sound very similar. The way the government did our Native comrades, it don't really matter what race you are. It seems like that age demographic, they're treated the same way. They have to assimilate and it's forcefully done, right? Um, and so I find that interesting that through transsectionality, there's a lot in common there. And then, just now we're hearing about all these unmarked graves of all these little babies that have been killed at these residential schools. And I hope to hell that we never find out that there was something that came to fruition from these juvenile schools where maybe they were mistreating people or abusing them. You could tell it's already happening just by the tone they're taking with folks. Um, and then, that just leads me to think about that whole school to prison pipeline. Like, there is no reform. Like, it almost seems like they're conditioning folks to get used to that prison environment by the way they just simply treating them, right? I don't know. I thought that was interesting.
Hmm.
How y'all feel about
Uh,
that?
let me say that you were speaking about Indiana Boys School.
Yes,
It
sir.
was sort of like a training school for boys, somewhat. It's like a detention center for kids, and remind me of a time that yeah, remind me of a time where I was walking down the street I was like 12, and I was walking with one of the people in my gang, and we passed this police car, and there was nobody in the car, and so somebody told me, "I dare you, man, break that glass." I said, "What? I dare you! How dare you break the glass of the police car?" I said, "Don't dare me, please. I dare you." So I broke the antenna of the car, and I broke the glass. And then all of a sudden, I see people coming out of the house. So I started running. Eventually, I got caught, and I went to Spofford, detention center for boys. And 2 weeks later, I went before the judge, and the judge the judge sentenced me to a year at Otisville State Training School for boys. It was
Damn.
it's a place upstate. And so I went upstate. It was nice. I mean, not too much in comparison to the jails and prisons. It was just it was a it was military trained. Kids get you had to march to the mess hall, and you had to get a line, and everything was military. You know, uh, but I spent a month in Spofford, and then I spent a year at Otisville State Training School for boys, and it was crazy. I mean, come on, man! I broke the car. They couldn't even prove it. Really, they couldn't even prove it in court because they didn't know who it was. But somebody must have said, "Well, it was him." Dropped that dime on me, and I took the blame. I said, "Yeah, I did it." And so so when you talk about Indiana Boys School, it reminded me of my days when I was a kid and being wild and crazy.
Man, but I mean, I thought there was something, forgive me, I don't remember if it was in the Constitution or something like that, some colonizer script that the supposed United States is supposed to be based on. But doesn't it say, let the punishment fit the crime? Like, damn, that seems a lot for just breaking a window.
Yeah, I mean, I broke the windshield of the car of the police. And I mean, come on, man. I mean, they gave me a month in Spofford, and then a year in Otisville State Training School for boys. You
Damn.
know, but the good thing about Otisville State Training School for boys that was that if you lived in dormitories, and if your dorm was up to par, like the beds were made, and the place was clean and everything, there's no garbage. At certain periods during the year, you would go to another reformatory, but this was a girls' reformatory. And so you got the chance to be with the opposite sex.
So
It was
for a young
crazy.
man, of course, you can be on your P's and Q's.
Yeah, it was crazy, but we was able, our dormitory got the chance to go, and I met some beautiful people, some beautiful sisters, and of course I danced with them, etc. No, nothing to get fresh about. We was
Yeah.
at least I don't know. I have a habit, man. I've always respected sisters. I never disrespected them in no kind of way. Even in the gang, when I was in the gang, I respected the women in the gang. And I think that one of the reasons for that is because I seen how my mother used to be treated.
Mm,
When she was when she was living with my stepfather, and how domestic violence played into that.
mm.
And I just couldn't see myself. I just couldn't see myself hitting on a woman. I never hit it on a woman. I've been married like 6 times now. I've been married 6 times now, but I've always treated ladies, sisters. I treat them, with utmost respect. I never mistreated them. If
Mm.
I was wrong, I was wrong. I always admitted to that. But that's because I've always been somewhat political throughout my life. I became very highly political at the age of 14, well, 15. So when I came out into the streets after 15 years, I was ready, man, and so I treated sisters the way they should be treated and the way they wanted to be treated. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
So,
Mhm.
and that's very important to me.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, 100% important. And thank you for that, comrade. Um, going back to the whole punishment fits the crime. I'm gonna say this quick story and then we'll continue. I was at a comrade's house one time, and I remember we were outside and he was a smoker. And so we were outside and he's smoking. And I was like, I don't really smoke, but I'm gonna hang out there with you. And we were just talking
Yeah.
and we were watching the neighborhood kids. And then
Mm.
this one kid came up to him and in Spanish was asking him, if he needed anything done around the yard. And then my comrade's looking, he was like, yeah, you go do this, do that. And the kid did it and then went back. And I was like, damn. I was like, so like, does he have a hustle? Like, cause he's just doing some yard work for you. And my comrade, he told me, goes, no, man. He said the kids were playing something, football, stickball, or something like that. And they hit a ball and then knocked out the back window of my truck. Well, his truck had one of those, I don't know what they're called, camper shells or bed caps or whatever.
Mm.
And during the height of the pandemic, there was no plexiglass. It's not made out of glass, it's made out of plexiglass
Yeah.
because all the cashiers at the stores have plexiglass, hospitals have plexiglass, so he couldn't get any plexiglass to replace it.
Mm.
So his mom, the kid's mom, found out it was him because, of course, the kid ran home, didn't say nothing. So my comrade caught it on camera and went and talked to the mom, and the mom and my comrade made a deal because she couldn't afford it that he would come over to his house and he'd clean up. He'd pick up dog shit, he'd clean up the yard, and they had like a contract. Like, I'm gonna do this with my kid for you for like a month. And my comrade was like, "Hey, that's cool. That's all I need." I mean, I just wanted to let you know he did it because I'm sure he wasn't gonna tell you he did it because I saw him running off on my camera. He had like a
Yeah.
Ring doorbell camera or something. So the mom was like, "Oh, really?" So of course the mom went and handled her business with him, but then came back after the fact and said, I don't have the money to pay you, but he's got to learn. So I'll send him over your house, put him to work at least once or twice a week. And it just happened to be when I was there. And actually, I think that was a beautiful thing. That's how community
Yeah.
handles it. We don't
I
we don't
think
need
that
to
was
call
I
no.
think that was a good way. You see, if people were like that, more, there won't be no need for people to be calling hello, the police and stuff like that. And then we resolve our own problems. Because I know that there's many options to
Yeah.
the, to the problems that exist in our communities. The
Oh
only
yeah.
thing is that we don't think. We don't think for a moment. The first thing that we do, we respond and call the police, thinking that the police is going to resolve our issues. But the police is not there to resolve our issues. So
Right.
we get caught up in situations, you know?
No, that's 100% right, comrade. And it's funny because I use that I use that story, and that just happened not too long ago, right in the height of the pandemic, to kind of use to try to tell folks that what we're conditioned, like you say, Comrade Jorge, what we're conditioned to do is, oh, let me call the cops right away or whatever. Or on the personal level, go and yell at that person, man, you're a kid, this and this and that. There's a way to handle things. So, like when I look at or when I talk to folks about abolishing the police, we don't need those damn pigs. Like, if anything, give money to community members that know the gang members. They can down talk folks, de-escalate any kind of gang violence. If there is theft or crime or whatever, there's a way to even handle that. Like my comrade handled it. He was like, "Oh, that's cool. That's a
Yeah,
really good idea." Like, I'm
yeah,
not trying to
yeah,
pick up dog shit. And he has
yeah,
like 6 dogs. Like,
yeah.
so
You know,
he was loving that.
I used to work in a restaurant as in a kitchen. Washing dishes, put them to the machine and all that. And then I used to empty the garbage. One day I was emptying the garbage, and there was this guy that was eating out of the garbage because we used to throw out a lot of food. And it so
Mm.
happened for some reason or the other, I don't know, but one of the managers walked out and started cursing at him. I said, why are you cursing at him, man? He's hungry. And here we are, man, a restaurant, man, full of food, throwing it away. And here's this man hungry, and he started, yelling at the guy. So I took out $10 out of my pocket and I said, here, man, go get something to eat. And he left. Because if he would have he would have stood there, he would have argued with the manager. The manager would have called the police. I know that for sure. And this guy, he's gone to jail just because he was hungry. Come on, man, it makes no sense. But I gave him $10, and I felt good about that. I felt real good.
just like in the statement of unity for the Second Rainbow Coalition, and I even think the preface mentions it. The police straight up are the enforcers of the state.
Yeah,
Honestly,
yeah,
I believe if it weren't for cops and the military, capitalism would have corroded a long time ago. People were they would have found a way to beat it, but
yeah,
they have that
yeah,
force and they have it for a reason to keep us oppressed, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, good for you
But
for doing that.
there's a lot of people in the armed forces right now that are there, and don't want to be there.
Yeah,
You know what I'm
right,
saying?
100%.
Don't want to
Yeah,
be there, but they're there, man, because for some reason, man, they're looking forward to something that's going to give them something to fall back on later on in life,
yeah,
and so
yeah,
they doing it. But a lot of people that are armed forces are not. I know some people that were captains, were sergeants, and they left the Air Force, the services, whatever service it was, and they started talking. They started talking about it, and it became part of us. You know, because look at the Panthers. A lot of Panthers, what they came out of. They came out of the
Vietnam.
Navy or the
Yeah,
armed forces.
yeah.
So little by little, we're gonna get there.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, 100%, hundred
No
percent.
doubt.
And as I was sharing that story about the comrade, Zombie put her hand up. So shout out to Zombie. Thank you for that. Kudos. There's a way, man. We could sell police. We could there's a way. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
like
there's
Comrade Jorge
definitely.
said, those people that are in the service, there's a lot of them that
I'm not. They don't want
maybe
to. That's right. They don't want to be there. They
yeah.
don't want to be
I
there.
can see that. I can see that. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and continue. So the first day there, we were all given a haircut, sprayed for lice. Let me stop right there. So I'm originally from El Paso, Texas, and El Paso's right on the border. Okay. And I remember learning firsthand about the Bracero program from my grandma. And I remember she had an old newspaper article. And they had all these Mexican nationals, and they were literally spraying them up so they could get disinfected. And then they were sent out to work, kind of almost like indentured servitude, if you think about it. So I remember when I heard that, I was like, damn, that's what they're doing to these kids, man. They lining them up, spraying for light. Like, God, that through my own intersectionality, I was like, God damn, that's harsh. Um,
Wow.
yeah, so the first day we were out there, we were given a haircut, sprayed for lice, given a communal shower, given gray jump shoots, and a DLC number. Mine was 967420. I would later carry that same DLC number to adult prisons later. Anyone ever sentenced to boys' school is logged into the Indiana Department of Corrections like any adult would be. We were officially inmates of the state, you can say. Logan Sport was the Reception and Diagnostic Center, or RDC, similar to the one they had for adults in Plainfield, Indiana. You went there to be processed into the Indiana Department of Corrections. Then they would determine where you would serve your sentence at. Initially, I thought I had only 6 months to do, but I found out that they ultimately determined how long you would have to do. I'm not sure. I'm sure you can imagine the look on my face when they informed me that I was going to have to do a year at the Indiana Boys School. I could have died right there. Logansport was very regimented in how they ran the facility, probably just like the military.
Yeah.
Every unit held 12 guys in a small open day room area throughout the day. We all slept in three-man cells at night. There was a TV for us to watch throughout the day and a card table if we wanted to pass our day playing cards. Normally, some guys would be preoccupied watching TV or telling the other war stories to impress each other, while others would be playing spades at the card table. That's where I really found my love for playing spades.
Mm.
Spades. The only thing that broke up the monotony of the day was any time we left our unit for chow or the hour or two we were given for recreation. Besides those breaks in the day, we spent most of our days in the day room awaiting our names to be called off to be shipped off to another facility where we would serve our time out. After my first week there, I got used to the daily routine, but I don't think I ever got comfortable. My first week, I witnessed a kid slammed onto a table head first right in front of me and then hogtied. And this was a white kid. I was on the phone with my mom in the middle of my weekly phone call with her when this fucking kid up here and that incident transpired. I would be lying if I said I wasn't worried about my own safety. My hand was still in the cast from breaking my knuckle during that incident with Mr. Marshall. However, I was sure they wouldn't hesitate to slam me around too, cast or no cast. I had seen them break into fights in the gym by slamming guys' heads first to the ground. I could tell they got a kick out of shit like that. Damn, those guards, man, they're so evil.
I
Mm.
know, I know, I know.
I mean, how you gonna treat kids like that, man? Like that's somebody's daughter or son, or you know, one of the hardest things that I remember ever being on TV was do y'all remember there was that TV show where troubled kids or whatever, they would throw them into like a fucking penitentiary and talk to inmates and stuff. And a lot of people were like, man, that's the greatest show ever. And I was like, why not have somebody that's already out and OG sit down and talk to them, show them some scars, or how many of them kids didn't get hugs, man? How many of them kids was stealing something just to fucking eat? Like that show was so heartbreaking. I forgot what it was called, Scare Straight or something like that. Man.
Mm.
Scared
Yeah,
straight.
they had scarce
Right,
state.
Scare Straight,
Yep.
right?
Scared
Yeah,
straight.
scarce state.
And then I
Yeah.
remember thinking, only because I have a public health background, I remember thinking, if anything, you're inducing more trauma to them. A lot of these kids, if they come from broken homes or if they come from the barrio like us, they have a rough life, and then you're gonna throw them into a rougher life. I mean, I get the point that they were trying to show them, where they would lead, but I think like that elder figure, whether it's male, female, or even a trans comrade, as long as it's like an elder person that can sit down to him and be like, look, youngin, see these stab wounds? Like this is what I, got beefing with another gang or whatever, or something, or why not be more positive and show them somebody like an entrepreneur that maybe has 5 or 6 businesses that they give back to the community. They're trying to use capitalism to turn its head back
Yeah.
and just something more positive. But no, it was
Yeah.
that. And
You
I
said you
remember
have a
thinking,
healthcare background?
public health. Yeah, I've been
Yeah.
in public health for a while, and it's interesting because just recently, everything in public health is more towards being trauma informed, more towards mental health, behavioral health, understanding why folks do stuff. And once you go down that route, it's an eye opener, and it really makes you see how the healthcare system alone, it almost seems like it was designed to keep
Well,
us fat,
I have
poor,
a
and sick.
bachelor. I have a bachelor in social work.
Oh, nice. Okay, yeah, 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 nice.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah,
I worked with the HIV clinics for a
yeah.
few years, and I worked with the addiction population for a few years.
Yeah,
So
nice.
altogether, I had about 22 years altogether doing both.
Let me tell you my experience dealing with folks that have like a LCSW or MSW,
Yeah.
like a Master's of Social Work or licensed clinical social workers. Them social workers, and nurses to me are the most underrated. Like social workers, I mean, I've heard of social workers like de-escalating and talking people off of a ledge, literally.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've heard of nurses coming across something that not just one or two, like a handful of doctors miss, and they were able to
Hmm.
save a life. Like that whole mental health, behavioral health aspect of life is very interesting, and it's interesting because if you look at a lot of the movements, that was one of the things that they fought for is health, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, even to this day in 2023, when we look at statistics, let's just say with COVID, something that was recent, who were the
Yeah.
highest hit people? It were people of color and poor people, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah.
Huh.
All right, I'm gonna continue reading. As much as they had hold parents accountable for child abuse these days, you would think that state facilities wouldn't be treating kids like that. Ain't that the damn truth? But I
Huh.
think that Logansport is one of the worst offenders of such conduct against kids. They employed such excessive force tactics routinely against the juvenile population the whole time I was there. Again, these juveniles at the time, I think, were treated with the adult population like they were treated as if they had been bogged down in civil litigation. But since we were juveniles and didn't know anything about civil rights violations, We didn't know how to defend ourselves against such abuse. We were forced to just endure it. How fucking heartbreaking is that?
Wow.
Man. And you can thank qualified immunity for the pigs, for officers, correctional officers. Literally, if not that I'm a proponent of this, but literally, if somebody on the street did what some of these police officers or correctional officers do to children, they'd be locked up. And Comrade Zombie, you have your hand up. Go ahead, Comrade.
Yeah, I just have an interesting little bit of trivia. Um guess who served time at the Indiana Boys School several times?
Oh, shoot. You got me.
Charles Manson.
No way.
Yeah, yeah,
No way.
yeah, yeah. Yep. It opened boys school, Indiana boy. You know, I'm in Indiana. Indiana
Mhm.
Boys School actually started, it got it opened like back in 18, God, was it 37,
Jesus,
73?
really?
I can't remember. Yeah, it was, I want to say, hold on a minute. Let me see if I can look it up real quick. It might have been 73, excuse me, 1873. But yeah, he was born in Ohio, but his family moved over here to Indiana and around the Indianapolis area, and like by 1948 he was already like thugging and robbing grocery stores and, and little pharmacies and all
Wow.
kinds of stuff, and actually spent like, oh my gosh, I think I read one time four or five times. No, okay, so for the for the next 5 years, so I'm not sure what the time frame is, Manson was in and out of institutions. He escaped from Indiana Boys School 18 times in 3 years.
Damn.
Yeah. Yeah, he was a little yeah, yeah.
A
So
little?
that was always pretty interesting, you
And it
know.
makes you wonder, like, when you see interviews of him as he got older, you can tell he's not all there. It just makes you
Yeah,
wonder,
he had
like,
a lot of psychiatric problems. He had.
but
Ain't
it
no
Yeah.
makes you
doubt about
wonder,
that.
did the
He
system
had a lot
attribute
of
to that?
psychiatric
Yep.
problems. You
Right?
Yep.
know, I mean, the mere fact of what he killed, those two young ladies or something like that, he killed two of them, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think, yeah,
It was
the
his crew. He
wasn't the
killed his
one
own crew.
the pregnant lady.
Yeah, the pregnant lady. Yeah.
Sharon somebody. But yeah, yeah, he spent time at Indiana Boys School in Logansport.
He's gone. He's gone with the wind now, huh?
I think he died several years back, didn't he?
I
Oh.
believe so, comrade.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's kind of creepy to think he was there, and
Right.
like how much of those experiences did not attribute to his psychiatric failure. You know what I
Yep.
mean?
Yep.
I
Yep.
can't help but think that, like, earlier when we were reading about the living conditions that Brother Kwame endured, and this is modern times, not that the 60s and 70s were that far away, and that still sounded like hell. Like,
Right.
I mean,
Right.
that
Well,
the
it actually got shut down. I believe, and that may be, I don't want to like pull something out of Kwame's book, but I want to say that it got shut down. I might be thinking of another one, but while you continue reading, I'll look it up because I'm pretty sure that it got shut down for abuse, for claims of
oh my
abuse.
God,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
disgusting.
Yeah. But I just thought that was an interesting little bit of trivia. You know, we ain't got much in Indiana, but we had Charlie Manson for a while.
Well, speaking of that, like in Spofford, back in the 80s, Spofford, it was found out that counselors in there were abusing because there was girls there in there too. One section
Mm.
was girls, and they were sexually abusing them girls, and some kids, boys, were being sexually abused by counselors. A few counselors came up on charges, and as a result of that, they were forced to close it down in the early 80s. They had to. Ain't no doubt.
God,
You
that's so
know,
disgusting, man.
yeah,
Like, and the thing that kills me is the government, the media. This nation will be the first one to talk shit about somebody else.
Yeah,
They're the first one to point fingers. Oh, the humanitarian crisis in Cuba. Cuba has La Brigada Blanca. It's the white coats, and they're literally military doctors that'll parachute into any country as long as you allow it, and they will try to cure any famine.
that's right. That's right.
You know
That's
what I'm
right.
saying? But like nobody
But
wants to hear that black and brown communists can do that.
yeah, and they put more pressure on Cuba so that they can't do that. You
Right.
see, but Cuba always finds a way of extending themselves because it's a revolutionary. You have to help people, regardless whether inside or outside. You still have to help, and that's what Che Guevara used to do. That's one of the reasons why he left and went to where did he go? Forgot. Was where did he
Argentina?
go? No, when he went, no, not his. That was his when he was on vacation from what you would call it. He went on a trip and throughout Latin America. But I'm talking about his last. He went to where he got killed. Where he get killed at? Bolivia, right?
Yeah, something like that. I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, that's when he went to Bolivia. Well, he didn't go to Bolivia. He went he went to various parts of Africa, to contribute,
Mm.
man, and helping people, man, fight those wars. In the United States, they do that too, but they don't do that with good intentions. You
Yeah.
see, and they always provide people with the wrong people with all those good intentions.
Yeah. 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 It doesn't surprise you though.
uh,
It doesn't
Well,
surprise.
I mean, look at they don't even want to admit to the fact that there's political prisoners and prisoners of war in this country. Because as far as I'm concerned, Puerto Ricanos in any prisons are prisoners of war. Have you ever read that book, War on All Puerto Ricans?
No.
Hold on for a minute.
Huh. That sounds interesting though, because I would hope everybody knows that the only reason why Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory, they say, is to have a tactical advantage against Cuba. That's it. If it wasn't for the war machine, they wouldn't care about Puerto Rico. A war against all Puerto Ricans. Okay. Check that out. Okay.
And it's written by Nelson A. Dennis.
Okay.
Check it out, man. It's smoking. This book is on the money. Talks about Aviso Campo, how they treated him in prison, and how they killed him. As far as
Damn.
because they did kill him.
Almost every revolutionary that has made big movements in this country has been assassinated. Look at Chairman Fred Hampton.
Yeah,
I mean, uniting the masses on a class level in the 60s. I mean, come on. And then I'm a firm believer that if the FBI or CIA didn't have something to do with the Chicago PD shooting up his place, um, you know, so that happened. If you look at other revolutionaries, if they're not dead, they're locked up. Leonard Peltier has been jailed now for what, 50 some odd years now.
yeah. I'm from the firm conviction that Huey Newton, even though there's stories out there about him, but Huey Newton got killed by the government.
Yeah. Yeah.
I firm. Somebody told he said, "No, man, he wasn't selling drugs and this or no, it's not." But no, I don't believe that. I believe that the government eventually killed him.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so
Or framed him or set him up or
or
painted him
framed
out
him
to
or set him
be,
up exactly.
yeah, something that he wasn't.
But
I agree.
something happened. It had the government involvement in that one.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, 100%. All right,
Well,
I'm
and
gonna go ahead and
Lobo,
yes.
as crooked as Daley was back in the 60s, all the CIA or the FBI had to do was get a hold of him and go, Hampton needs to be gone.
Right.
And
You're
that's
right
all they
though,
had to
man.
do. You
You're
know
right.
that. And
Yeah.
and his and as CPD took care of it,
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any truth to this. I'd like to ask brother Hyde, but I heard that Daley and that J. Edgar Hoover were best of friends.
Oh,
That
dude,
alone,
if
that
you read
alone should
some of
tell you
the
something.
if you read some of the history of Chicago back in those days, good Lord, man. The mayor was worse than the criminals.
The mayor was a criminal.
Well, right, right, right.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and continue. So the guys I met at Logansport were locked up for a wide range of offenses. Some were there for theft, gun possession, drug possession, car thefts, or like me, battery cases. If you met many of them off the street, you would discover that many of them were approachable and down to earth. And that's very true too. A lot of people that I don't want to say live that life or come from that life, they are very humble and down to earth. You know, I remember being a kid growing up in the border area in the 90s. That whole narco cortura was barely coming up, and there was literally a war between gangs on one side, gangs on the other. And I don't know how many times I talked myself out of, oh, please don't shoot me. I just stepped on your Nike Cortez. It's all good, or whatever, because they were down to earth, believe it or not. Many of the stereotypes I had before spending time around these guys began to dissipate as the weeks began going by. A number of them I recognized had an unfair roll of the dice. They had simply been born in households and neighborhoods that had virtually been abandoned and had abandoned them to raise themselves. Others, like me, were driven by anger and feelings of contempt for life for one reason or another. Most of them I really liked and spent a lot of my days getting to know. As boring as Logan Sport was, anything could break up the monotony of our days, and we had no problem getting into a little mischief if it meant finding a little excitement. I remember one particular day, we probably had only been there 2 or 3 weeks when a white dude had come up to a group of us who were just sitting around kicking it. When he asked us if he can join our gang, he wanted to be part of a gang. He said before we got to IBS, Indiana Boys School. Normally, when our recreation period rolled around, we would go to the inside or outside rec with another unit. So there would always be a larger group of us together. By this time, a number of us had started hanging out together every time we all linked up at rec. If you didn't know, you would have thought we were all gang type because of how we fraternized and hung out. As far as the black kids, it was clear that we were the popular crowd there. But many of us came from different cities across Indiana and claimed various street gangs. I stopped claiming myself. I wanted to enter boys' school just being me. Besides, I really didn't know a lot of the gang lit, so I figured it would only be embarrassing if I was ever questioned. I didn't realize at the time that most guys in the gangs didn't know too much about their origins or literature either. Most were in it to be a part of something like I had. Nonetheless, I remember when this white guy walked up and asked us to join our gang. We all turned and looked at each other with smiles on our faces. It was like we were all thinking the same damn thing. We got ourselves a send off today, fellas. I think me and my guy, Fort Wayne, were the first to speak up. I think Fort Wayne was a CPT or something. That was the first time I even heard of somebody being a CPT before. The only gangs I ever heard of in that were GDs and Vice Lords. Like I said, I wasn't claiming anything myself, yet here we are with a group of guys who claim CPT, GD, VL, Dog Life, Latin Kings, etc. And he was asking all of us to join our gang. After we conferred with each other for a few minutes, we told this sucker that we would allow him to if he beat up somebody of our choosing. He agreed, and we all conferred for a few more minutes before deciding on who the target would be. I forgot why we selected the white dude that we did. I think we all just felt that he thought it was tough or something, and we wanted to see him get whooped. So dig this, one of the guys said. You see dude over there? Yeah. If you beat him up, we'll let you in. And when we get to boys' school, ain't nobody going to fuck with you because you'll be one of us, okay? Okay, cool. With that, he made a beeline over to him. You should have seen the smirks on our faces when he walked off. It wasn't a long fight at all. As soon as he sucker punched the other white guy, the guy turned around and commenced to beating his ass. We were all laughing as we watched him get his ass served to him on a silver platter. When the correctional officer signaled a 10-10 was occurring in the gym on their walkie-talkies, several officers flooded into the gym and rushed over and slammed both of them to the ground. Everybody hit the wall, one of the officers yelled. And like that, it was over. I think he spent 3 days in disciplinary segregation before he was allowed to go back to the other unit we went to rec with. The first opportunity he got to to all of us, he asked us if he was now a part of the gang. We told him because he had lost the fight that he had to fight somebody else. He declined and walked off with his head down. I, f- I felt Logansport knowing I could be. I left Logansport knowing I could be a leader and build my own clique if I chose to.
Mm.
My first 3 or 4 months at the Indiana Boys School located in Plainfield, Indiana, was uneventful. Like Logansport, it was very regimented too. Every morning we would wake up and line up for breakfast. Everywhere we went, we had to walk up in a single file line out of our cottage and had to yell out of our place in line when we left our dorm. They did that to make sure everybody was present. When we got to the chow hall, you weren't allowed to talk or sit anywhere you wanted. So me and my guys would all line up in the line together so we could sit at the same table with each other in the chow hall whenever we sat down to eat.
Mm.
After breakfast, we would go back to the cottage for a little and watch TV before going to school. I forget the name of the school, but you could actually graduate from there if you had enough credits. Since I only needed a few more credits to graduate high school, I made sure I stayed focused on their tasks. I didn't want to have to go back to Pike to graduate. Depending on the day of the week, we would normally get inside, rec before lunch, or sometime afterwards. Later in the day, if the weather permitted, they would give us rec again after dinner. About 3 days out of the week, we all had to attend group sessions with either the counselor or the psychologist who was assigned to our cottage. But that was pretty much our routine every day. Out of everything, I hated the group sessions we were forced to attend the most. Hmm.
Mm.
It didn't take me long to realize that those sessions were no more than a formality we had to endure in order to get out of boys' school. They weren't really designed to rehabilitate us. Most of the time, we went in there and told them what they wanted to hear from us. As long as you did that, all the staff would sign off and give you a SAT for those 3 weeks you were conducting clear and did what they wanted of you. Everything revolved around getting SATs or unsat. So I guess satisfactory, unsatisfactory, which was short for satisfactory or unsatisfactory. The whole year was divided into 16 3-week periods. During each 3 weeks, as long as you did as you were supposed to do, all the staff would give you a SAT for unsatisfactory for those weeks, for those 3 weeks. You had to get at least 12 SATs in order for you to be released after your year was up. So damn, even if you did your time, if you didn't get your your SAT reports, you probably still had to do more time. They always find a way to keep oppressing people. I have a nephew that's locked up in Oklahoma right now, and just the things that he has to do to make a phone call, he's got to pay on a prepaid card. If he wants an extra meal a day, he's got to pay for that. Like it's unbelievable. People are oppressed, then they get into prison, and then they get more oppressed, and then more oppressed and more oppressed. It's almost disgusting. I'm gonna stop right there. Does anybody have anything to say about all that?
Yeah, well, like Spofford, as a matter of fact, they used to give you half of food.
Hmm.
I mean, like for instance, like a frank, you'll get half a frank. You know, if you're supposed to get a spoon of rice, you get half a spoon. You used to get half of everything, just practically. But when I went to Otisville State Training School, over there it wasn't that bad because during the daytime you work, whatever job they assign you to, and then in the evenings you hang out with your little crowd, and you go to the back of the door because it was dormitories. So you go in the
Hmm.
back and you listen to some music. We used to be listening to the old doo-wops, the old doo-wops, and all we did was listen to some music, etc. The only thing is that at 9 o'clock you had to be in bed. You couldn't talk. It was silence all through the night. I remember one night I was in bed. I was talking to my next door neighbor. He had his bed next to, well, the other bed next to mine. And I was talking, all of a sudden the counselor heard me. He said, George. I said, yeah, come here. So I got out of
Oh,
bed, he
damn.
came over. And you know what he did? This asshole, he put on the floor, he put a whole bunch of rice. Then he told me to kneel on it. And I had to kneel on that rice for about 2.5 hours. I was,
Damn.
I was painful. It was painful. But if I didn't do that, then I would go to what they call I forgot what they call it. In the daytime, you have to break rocks with a hatchet, just breaking it. And you'd be there all day doing that. And I didn't want to do that. So I stood up as a fool. And that was my punishment. So you could imagine the different punishments that people used to get. It was ridiculous, man.
Damn, and you know what Comrade Zombie just said? That's fucking abuse, and straight up, that is abuse. It's just
Yeah.
disgusting how we treat
And here I am,
people
12
on a
years old.
humanistic
12, I'm
level,
12
man.
years old. How can you treat me like this, man?
For
I
real.
mean, and here's a counselor, man. And I became a counselor, but that was a different story. But here's a counselor that's supposed to know how to treat people, and he's treating kids, man, like, hey. So it's like being in a penitentiary. It's like being in the penitentiary. It's still a jail, whether you see it, regardless of how good some of the stuff may be, it's still a jail. It's
Right.
still,
And
you know,
isn't there something no cruel and unusual punishment? Well, that's cruel and unusual, man.
I know it's always, they say that, but hey, it's no such thing as justice.
Yeah, true that, Comrade. Comrade
That's
Zombie. Oh, I'm sorry.
another
Go ahead.
thing. I hear a lot of people talking about this brother that got killed. They want justice. Who are they expecting justice from? The system? Come on, man.
You know what? That's a very good point, Comrade, because like qualified immunity, and I'm a union man, okay, 20 years in the union, but I could tell you the police unions are just as corrupt, man. They are just filthy. Politicians, like, so when you say justice, like on what? This country was never founded for us in mind, man. Not even so that's maybe talking more on a racial level, but even on a class level, they don't want the working people to get true justice.
But you was in a different your union, because I was a union too, union member. But your union, my union, are totally different from the police union.
Yeah,
Their
true.
whole perspective of unionization is different from our unions. Much
Yeah,
different.
true
You
that.
know.
Comrade Zombie, you've had your hand up, Comrade. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that the whole issue is, and you know this. I mean, I'm not coming out with any brilliant, revelation here. The whole system is designed to be punitive.
Mm,
It's not designed to rehabilitate. It's designed to punish. And it's fucking perverted, man. I mean, it's these people that that get off on punishing other people. They get some joy from it. I mean, our system has never been about rehabilitation. And then it got worse in the 1980s with fucking Reagan and his the super gangs. you
that's
know
right.
we got to worry about these super predators. They specifically went after youth, like it was some game or something. Started calling these kids super predators. I really liked what you said, Lobo, about you realize that some of these kids never had a chance.
Yeah.
They just never had a chance. I mean, I did my master's is in criminal psychology,
Mm,
and I did a lot of studying of gang membership. And it was something that mattered a lot to me after I lived and worked in LA for a while. And I saw these kids. I made the comment one time, I've seen more dead 16-year-olds than anybody should have to ever see in their life.
mm,
And it just started to study it, and you find that that's absolutely true. Some of them just never even had a chance. And it's because of our damn economic system and the way that our government is set up.
100%.
You know,
100%, comrade.
You know,
100%. And
you
I like what you said. It is formed on a punitive basis.
Mhm.
There is no rehabilitation.
No. Have you
There
ever seen some of the prisons in like some of the European countries?
Yeah.
Dude, they look like hotels. They got swimming pools. They got, and they teach people. They educate them, and they treat them like human beings instead of like animals. And you get better results when you do that, but it probably also doesn't make you as much money, so it ain't never gonna happen here.
There you go. You just tapped onto something there, comrade, because let me tell you that the for-profit prisons, or
Oh
even
my God.
even the ones that are just like on a state level or whatever,
Yep.
and let's say they have inmates making stuff. I remember, again, being from the border area, I remember an uncle of mine wanting to get a saddle. And for those that don't know, horse saddles, they're pretty pricey, all leather ones. And then I remember somebody was like, "Oh, well, go to the pinta, go to the pen. The inmates
Yeah.
will make it for half the price." And I remember my uncle thought about it, and then he was like, that don't sound right. Like, there's
Right.
some poor
Right.
schmuck in there,
Right.
just counting his days, and I'm gonna take
Right.
advantage of this like slave labor just because I
Well,
get a good deal. Like, no.
13th Amendment.
That's it. That's it, comrade. You got it.
13th Amendment.
I was in a meeting not too long ago, and the topic was Attica, and one of the brothers, I don't know what happened to his head, but one of the brothers he started talking about, well, we need some reforms in Attica. I said, hold up, back up. Attica is a reform. Before all the rebellions back in the 20s and early, back in the 20s, there was rebellions all throughout the prison, New York, not New York in particular, but around state prisons. And as a result of that, especially specifically in New York, they came up with a model. It was called Attica. And Attica was formed as a result of this formula that they had with reformers. They came up with this idea, and they built Attica. So if they built Attica, and Attica's supposed to be a reform, and Attica went up in flame in 1971, how are you going to reform something that already been reformed?
Right.
That's a good point, though. Like, yeah.
After I argued with the brother, he said, okay, Che, okay. I said, man, you can't, I'm not about reforming. I'm about destroying all the prisons, really.
Yeah.
Because to tell you the
Mhm.
truth, I mean, I got a bachelor's. I got a bachelor's in psychology, and to tell you the truth, people don't really understand the problems of many of them prisoners, man. They really don't understand it, and so when you watch the news and hear somebody that killed somebody, the first thing that comes to people's mind, oh, he should get this, he should get that.
Oh.
You don't even understand all the factors that went into that person's personality that made him do what he did.
Well, but that's not, and they don't want to. They don't want to understand.
Exactly.
That's why the prison system is the way that it is in this country. They don't even want to look at it. So we lock them away so that the fragile people out there don't have to see them. And then they don't have to deal with the problem. They don't have to figure out what it is that's causing all of this anyway. They don't have to deal with the poverty and the inequity and all of that stuff. Just lock them away, and then we don't have to look at them anymore.
And a lot of people in the early 20s and early 30s, a lot of people that were convicted for murder and got the electric chair, it was found out later on that they were innocent of the crime that they supposed to have committed.
Yep. Innocence Project out of New York. I think that since they started, they have freed 220 people from death row that were wrongfully convicted. 220 people
Yeah.
that could have been wrongfully executed.
Yeah.
You know, but the average American doesn't care. As long as they're not in their face, you know, they don't care.
Yeah.
Damn, that's crazy. God, that is so crazy. I think the most asinine thing that I've experienced, and when I say I've experienced, I know of a family, but this most asinine thing that I experienced about the prison system is I knew a family that all Chicanos, they have large families, and so it was a brother of, it was like a family of like 6 or 7 brothers, all boys, right? And I remember something happened. Half of the brothers were born on the Mexican side, others on the American side, and there was like a few years gaps where you can tell mama had the kids in Mexico and then the kids in the US. So like I think the gap in years was like a good 5 or 10 year gap, right? And I remember one of the brothers that was the Mexican national who was trying to quote unquote do the right thing, get his citizenship and all that, and was working here, got in trouble. And so he was sent to a special program where if he did time in, I think it was something hardcore like Marines, Navy SEAL, something like that, but it was some kind of military. If he did time in the military, they would waive away his prison time, right? So obviously he's going to do it, right? So he did that. And then his other brother, who was a Mexican national, actually, if I'm dating myself, this was his Operation Desert Storm or Iraqi Freedom, one of those two. It was one of the in the Bush administrations. He signed up to serve in the American forces so that he could be an American citizen. So something happened that, and these two individuals saw combat and they had all that trauma. And I remember something happened that when the guy that was the Mexican national came over and was done with his deployment, they said, no, something was wrong in Washington, D.C. You can actually get your citizenship. And they deported him. And then his brother came back from seeing battle and got his citizenship and was able to get his record cleared and then got his citizenship. But yet his own brother went through the same regiment and wasn't able to get it. And so literally you have these two brothers, that one is now a clean slate and is quote unquote an American citizen. The other one tried to volunteer with the American government so that he could become an American citizen. And not only did they use him in war and deport him and ship him back, they said no. And I remember seeing the look on both of their eyes, like they had just been fucked over. And like you don't even want it at that point. Your brother can't have it. It was so disgusting. And there's actually a movement. I think it's called Deported Veterans or Veterans that are deported or something like that, where these men will try to get U.S. citizenship and they'll try to go in the military and they just end up getting fucked over. And so this was back in the 80s and 90s. I don't know if they have that option now. Of course, this was back in Texas, and everything in Texas is very pro-military, pro-law enforcement. It wouldn't surprise me if they still have things on the books now where if you get in trouble, if you do some kind of military tenure, they'll wipe it off the books instead of, you having to go to prison or whatever. But I think that was one of the most compelling stories I had against the whole prison system, against the military industrial complex. And then we heard about Vanessa Guillen. And so now, like Comrade Jorge said, a lot of people are in there, they don't want to be in there. I even take it a step further. Why even bother? Like that whole Montgomery GI Bill and getting free education, fuck that. There's other ways. I mean, just the horrors that they have going on within the military. And most of the American military is black and brown, just like the prison system, right?
Exactly. And I mean, we got to look at the reality. The situation is getting worse. And it seems to me somewhere down the line, Donald Trump is trying to sneak in there, man, and get his election. And I, I mean, I won't doubt it a minute if he was to be elected. because that what was that, January 6th, that whole, all that stuff that happened January 6th, I haven't heard too much about it. I haven't heard too much about it. I haven't heard somebody said in the news, well, he got 10 years, he got 20 years, he got 15 years. I haven't heard none of that stuff. But yet I hear when it happens to people of color, immediately they put it on the news, man, flash. Flash.
Yeah, that's very true, comrade.
So, I
Yeah.
mean, come on, man, so I got a feeling that as quiet as kept, they're gonna try to bring back the whole thing about the what is that, the what they used to do during the Vietnam War. You was drafted, the
Oh, the
draft.
draft. Oh man.
Listen, I mean, this government cannot function without war. It,
Yeah.
it prospers when it's war. They make money. It's big money. War is big money. And so I think, I got a feeling they're gonna bring back the draft. Because there's too many young kids out there running wild. And no, no telling what they may do. So they're gonna try to take these kids and put them in the army. They're gonna try to do that, and the only way they could do that is through the draft.
That's a interesting point you're making there, Comrade Jorge, because now that you mention it, I think either read a book or saw a documentary where almost every war or conflict we've had was the root cause of us perpetuating that war machine so that we can make profit, right?
Yeah,
If you go back to the Mexican-American War, it was all for a land grab. The Spanish-American War was same thing, land grab. World War I, World War II, it was all for resources. They claimed it was the fight against fascism in World War II with the Nazis and the Allies and so forth, right? Same thing with Korea, right? They claimed that it was to stop communism with North Korea and so forth, right? But what there was like poppy seeds or something like that, opium
yeah,
in Korea or something like that. And
yeah,
then even if you look at current stuff, everybody knows why we were in Afghanistan and Iraq. It's because of the damn
Mhm,
oil, you
mhm.
know? So
Well, not
it's
only
like,
oil. It's not only oil, but there's what they call the oh God, what's this drug that they got over there? Oh, damn, I forgot.
Hmm.
My mind
Lobo,
went.
I'm gonna send you a picture, Lobo. I just pulled it off the internet the other day. There's a really good picture that shows all of the conflicts that the United States has been involved in since World War II. And you look at the names of these countries and you're like, motherfuckers. you know,
ah,
it's like it's like countries that are coming up in socialism,
mm,
and they're turning their economies around and all of this other stuff, and then boom, here comes the United States.
mm.
Boom, boom, and it's like 4 or 5 columns of country names. I'll DM it to you when we get done here.
Yeah, please do. I'd love to see that because it's sad
Yeah,
to say it doesn't surprise me. Like,
yeah, it's
it
pretty
doesn't surprise
fascinating.
me. Yeah,
Yeah.
imperialism, they do that. They
Oh
do
yeah.
that. I mean, the Romans, they were perfect at when they would expand their empire, they would actually recruit from within and brainwash the people that the Roman way is the best way. Half of the
Yeah.
Roman legion weren't Roman Italian people. They weren't,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. We're
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
we're shitty, man. We are a shitty country.
We should, we're the shithole country.
We
Well, you know
right.
something. I had an argument. Not too long ago with this conservative woman, which she was very conservative, and she had a hat on. You know, uh, "Make America Great Again." So I told her, I said, "Listen, let me ask you a question." She said, "What?" I said, "When has America been great?
Right.
When has
Right.
America been great? Tell me."
Yeah.
She
You know
didn't know.
what? You know what our answer to that
She goes,
question is? Because I do a lot of TikTok lives with my friends and stuff. And when we'll ask people that too, so when was America great? And they'll give us all these different times. And I'll go, when America was great? The day before we landed. in 1492. That's the last time America was great. The day before we landed.
I like that, but I would tell them something.
Yeah.
You gave me an idea. You gave me an idea. The next time I get into an argument with somebody like that, I'm going to say, you know when America was great? When she decided not to come to this country, but yet came.
Right.
That was great. At that moment.
Yep. Day before it was colonized. That's when.
All right, comrades, let me go ahead and continue here.
Yeah, I got 10 more minutes.
So page 130. I remember one group session I went to that I'll never forget. We were meeting with the psychologist this particular time. He told us that according to statistics, 2 or 3 of us would end up in prison for our lifetime. I remember looking around the room thinking that I would be one of those 3 that would never go to prison. I think everybody else was thinking the same thing. If it wasn't that bad, he went on to tell us that if we had gone to boot camp, 3 or 4 of us would have gone to prison in our lifetime. I will never forget those statistics. At the time, I just knew I didn't ever want to see an adult prison in my life. But the bigger question is, what does it say about a juvenile injustice system that knows those numbers and statistics? What does it say about an institution that largely will contribute rather than lessen the mass incarceration rate in this nation? When I think back to those statistics and what I had experienced during that year in boys' school today, I think it's more of an indictment of this capitalistic, imperialistic system than anything else. Prison and juvenile facilities are an integral part of the class oppression of this society. Nowhere have I found it to be about rehabilitation whatsoever. And just like Comrade Zombie said, it is, and it's all about retribution, repression, very punitive. Everything's punitive, right? I mean, it's obvious. It's extremely obvious. There's no rehabilitating. There's no rehabilitating. I think even so, in my background in public health, I remember at the height of the pandemic when, gosh, what's the vaccine? It's the one shot, Johnson and Johnson came out. There were hours-long conversations on, well, we have a houseless population and we have a corrections health population. Do the inmates even deserve it? Do you want to give it to them? And I was like, shit, just give them the choice. They could take it or not. Why is this even up for discussion?
Right.
You know? And if that isn't an eye opener, I don't know what would be. And I'll never forget thinking those poor people, had they only known the meetings that I'm privileged to, there's literally talking about, are we going to vaccinate people? Like, and that's just mind-boggling to me. Yeah. Not in juvenile facilities or adult ones did I ever want to be in. There were no rich kids in boys' school when I was there. Everyone came from a working class or impoverished background. Isn't that interesting? So even the white kids that were there were from the class struggle. If you think about it. Why is that? Again, is it this class dynamic and nature of this sort of system? Most of the kids I came across were there for economic crimes like drug possession, theft, robbery, or something involving it. There was always a class dynamic behind why they found themselves there and not some rich white kid. Well, yeah, because they can afford good lawyers and they probably know politicians. The only thing boys' school did was socially condition me to become more criminal in my thinking. Sometimes I wonder if I didn't go to boys' school, would I have ever graduated to doing robberies that led me to prison? So not only is it not reformist, not only is it punitive, it's actually contributing to the problem.
It's training school.
You know, obviously, look at Charles Manson.
School. Yeah.
Look at Charles Manson.
It's training school.
That's 100% true. Yeah. It was around the spring of '97 that a number of us came together to form our own clique. I knew Marcus Russell from attending Pike before getting locked up, so it was only natural for him to be one of our founding members. Cool Mike and I met at Logan Sport and got super tight while we were there. He was the first Latin king I had ever run into. I dug him because he talked a lot of shit and was a white Mexican who had a lot of heart. Brains was the youngest of the clique. He and I became like brothers. Dolan was a short, cocky brother who we also brought into the fold. He was from Columbus, Indiana, but was one of the coolest motherfuckers I ever came across. Though Mike came in later, but we embraced him as part of our clique too eventually. We called ourselves United Soldiers, aka US for short. We certainly developed an US versus them mentality too. We certainly developed an us versus them mentality too. We even had our own handshake. This was the first time I really built something with guys who also claimed various street affiliations. We didn't have any one leader per se. We all voted on everything together. Whenever you saw one of us, there was a good chance at least one or two of us were right there too. I had never bonded with a group of guys like that before I had done time with them. We did everything together. Anytime we went to the gym, we were always hitting the weights or playing basketball together. We were so intent on being the toughest clique in the facility that we normally hit up the weight pile together whenever we went to the gym. My bench press was solid in boys' school too. I could bench press 255 once and work out with 225s on a regular basis at my climax. Man, you couldn't tell me shit back then. It did it didn't take long before we started throwing our weight around. My first fight was with a cocky white dude named S in the status room. The status room was a separate area in the dorm where we were permitted to play pool, video games, and listen to music. I forget how many sats in a row you had to acquire to be allowed in the status room, but I had been a role model offender for my first 3 or 4 months. The particular incident, though, revolved around the radio we were listening to. Normally, we would switch back and forth between hip hop music and whatever the white guys wanted to listen to every other two songs. Well, we had to let them listen to about five rock and roll songs in a row. I felt we had been more than fair, but I was ready to listen to some hip hop while I shot pool with one of the guys. I turned the station. S got mad and commanded me to turn it back to what they were listening to. I told him that they had listened to more than two songs and we hadn't said anything about that. He didn't care. I still remember the song that I had turned it to, Nobody by Keith Sweat.
Hmm.
When he saw that I wasn't going to change it, he got all worked up and started to huff and puff. Came and picked a pool ball and hit me on the side of the head with it. After that, it was on and popping. The fight didn't even last a full minute, I don't think, before the staff rushed into the status room and handcuffed both of us and took us to Cottage 13. Cottage 13 was a disciplinary unit. They transported you anytime you got into a fight. They also held long term juvenile prisoners over there under administrative segregation status if you continued getting into trouble while in boys' school. I was only ever transported there for the fights I had gotten into. I hated every time I went to that unit because they would lock you in a single man cell for most of the day. You only came out of your cell for chow while the others that housed were in that separate facility. The first time we all came out for chow is when I got a chance to see S's face for the first time since our fight earlier that day. He looked like Mike Tyson had beaten his ass. His right eye was closed shut and black and blue. After that fight, we went back to sit to the hill, which is what they call general population there. Everybody started calling me Tommy Hearns because his face looked like Martin Lawrence did when Tommy Hearns beat his ass on that Martin sitcom episode. I didn't have any more problems out of S after that incident. Fights were a normal part of boys' school. You could hear 1010s over the radio all the time in cottages. One, two, three, four, six, and eight. That summer, the younger kids in cottage one and two had an actual race riot. I never found out what that was over, but we all mused about it when the news of it spread around the hill. I think for a lot of us, we were out to establish our reps and make a name for ourselves. On the other hand, I think a lot of the fights that had occurred were due to us being young and more inclined to act off impulses rather than to de escalate situations. As for myself, I think a lot of my fights had a lot to do with setting examples. I had learned, ever since beating JR up in the cafeteria with that lunch tray, that the best deterrent was to put a vicious beat down on your opponent so others would fear to cross you the next time. Since we were trying to make a name for United Soldiers Clique, one of the fights I was in was just about setting an example in the cottage against any rivals. Around the spring of 97, they placed a dude in our cottage from southern Indiana that we started calling Swisher, Sweet. because he had these light brown eyes and was a little too feminine for our liking. I had gotten into a one-on-one fight with him in the shower several weeks before. Anytime we wanted to get away with fighting someone one-on-one, we would call them into the shower and have our other guys in the lookout for staff. Well, I learned an important lesson from this first fight, which was with Swisher Sweet. I never fought somebody with socks on. I don't feel like I lost a fight per se, but I do feel like he had gotten more punch-ins and did a better job wrestling against me as we fought in the shower. He was smart. He had taken his socks off, so he was able to get a lot more traction when we were tussling around in the shower. What angered me was that he left out of the shower before I was finished and tried to claim a victory. Yet he refused to ever go back into the shower to fight me again. In the weeks after, he and I bumped heads several times, and I didn't want to go back to College 13 and accrue yet another unsat for fighting him in the day room. Well, I ended up beating up another guy in school in the building, and he told on me. So I ended up getting sent to College 13 for the incident anyways. I knew I was going to catch another unsat for that no matter what. Anyways, he and Brains ended up getting into it in the day room one afternoon. Swisher Sweet had gotten into his face and everything, talking mad shit. I had had enough of him by this time and was itching to split his wig. So as they were arguing, I ran up on him from the back and hit him as hard as I could with a right hook to his temple. I never dropped someone with a single blow before, but when I hit him, he fell forward to the ground, causing all the chairs around him to spread as if a meteorite had landed in the middle of the ocean. As soon as he hit the ground, Brains and I were on him like white on rice. All we could do was cover up as we rained down punches after punch to his head. The whole cottage watched us beat the shit out of Swisher Sweet that day. We all got sent to Cottage 13 for that altercation, but when we came back, everybody in that cottage knew our clique wasn't to be fucked with. That incident, you could say, made us a real clique. Not only did a lot of us other guys both fear and respect us in our cottage, it forged a bond between us as a group. Since I had come to Brains' aid and assistance, he and I became even tighter. If I ever needed any aid and assistance myself, I already knew Brains would be the first volunteer to put in some work. Moreover, I think all the other guys in our clique started to see me as our de facto leader. I say that because anytime I suggested something, everyone would vote unanimously with me. I never claimed I was or anything, but I realized that you could lead a group without making claims to be such. That summer, I brought a vote to the table for Cool Mike to whoop another guy in the cottage for stealing something from Marcus. He carried out the wishes of the group and further established our group in our dorm and around the hill. I knew before being released from boys' school, I had plans on taking our embryonic gang to the streets. The time I had done in boys' school up to this point had me thinking more and more criminal. I realized crime was about getting away with something and never getting caught. Occasionally, we would sneak weed in through the visiting room. I remember one time we had gotten access to the counselor's office and made a few phone calls out to our loved ones. As minor as those things were, it was about beating the system that had built up barriers to us and exploiting us. The fact that they made us pay to talk to our loved ones on the phones would actually, one would naturally seek ways around those exorbitant phone rates. And that's still happening to this day. Some of the ways state facilities condition a person to be criminally inclined is the way they strip you from stuff that citizens take for granted, which isn't criminal at all. Not everyone has the luxury to talk to their family and loved ones on state phones. Who wouldn't want to find ways around high phone bills, for instance? But this is something as trivial as that became a vehicle to further criminal socialization. In boys' school, it was about breaking into the counselor's office to call your loved ones. In the county jail, guys would have someone steal people's information in order to set up burner phones. When I got to prison for my robbery case, we went from all that to smuggling in cell phones from the guards or other creative ways. What started off as simply wanting to stay in touch with your loved ones, by the time you find yourself in prison, you're smuggling in cell phones to run a small drug trafficking ring. This is one of the many ways in which state institutions increasingly socialize their their populations to accept criminality as a way of life. I first experienced this change in my personality while serving time in boys' school. I'm gonna stop right there real quick. Anybody has anything to say about that? 100% non-reformative. Go ahead, Comrade Jorge.
Yeah, before I go, in regards to the you talked about isolation, right?
Yes, sir.
And I was in this Catholic school. I was put in this Catholic school by my mother because she had to go for an operation in the hospital, and for some reason, you know, I I got a stupid family, and so nobody wanted to take responsibility for me. And of course, I don't know if you went to my talk that I just had recently, uh, but I talked about Attica, but I also talked about my background. And one of the things I said was, my family, I was the black sheep of the family. And so I was put in this Catholic home temporarily. And I had to get up early in the morning and say prayers and stuff like that. And, I all my life as a kid, I never believed. So I questioned that. And one of the nuns that were attending the kids, she said, "You supposed to believe in God." I said, "No, I ain't supposed to do nothing. I ain't supposed to believe in God. If I don't want to believe in God, I don't believe in God." And she said, "How could you say you don't believe in God, kid? You don't." I said, "No. Don't tell me that I'm supposed to believe in God. You believe in God, you believe in God, but don't tell me that." And so guess what? They put me in the isolation.
Damn.
I was 7 years old. They put me in this isolation, no bed, no roof, no sink, no nothing. They put me in there for about 5 hours in the dark. Ain't that a kick in the ass? Because
Damn, that is child
and I didn't
abuse,
believe in
man.
God. Come on, man. I mean, with all due respect, man, but like, don't try to impose. See, and when people, I have friends that believe, and I respect them. And I keep my grounds. I don't want to overlap and go over. So one of my Attica brothers say, we talk every day. He's telling me about, oh, God. And I don't say nothing because he knows that I don't believe, but I let him talk because, with all due respect, but don't impose it on me.
Yeah.
When you impose it on me, then I got all the right in the world to tell you how I feel.
Right. And
you
you're
know,
definitely not gonna make anybody a believer by Jesus,
no,
7 years
no,
old, being alone in a
I
dark
got to
room.
think about that. But anyway, before I go, I want everybody to look at this book, The Meaning of Marxism.
It's upside down, comrade. Oh, is that what it
Oh,
says? Oh, okay, yeah. Okay,
The
I see
Meaning
that.
of Marxism.
Okay.
Okay, it's Paul D'Amato. He's from the Socialist Party. He's from
Mm,
the Socialist Party. It's a good writer. It's a good writer. It's a lot of good stuff in there. And please try to get this. War on
yeah.
all Puerto Ricans, because that talks about Mexico también. You know,
Oh,
y'all,
okay.
y'all, y'all got a wall, man. Y'all got to get back everything that was taken from y'all, man. There was a lot that was taken from y'all.
Hell yeah, land back.
Yeah, I know. All that Texas, all that was yours, man. All that was
Yeah,
yours. And,
yeah,
and somebody asked me the other day, well, when is the Mexican? I said, hold back up. Not Mexicans, Chicanos.
yeah. That's
Chicanos,
it.
not
Yeah,
Mexicans.
that's it.
He said, okay, Chicano. One of the Attica brothers. Well, when they're gonna get their land back? I said, I don't know. You gotta talk to the Chicanos on that one.
And you know what's funny is they've been trying. There's a for those of you that like doing research in history, there is a brother. If you go to Google and you do Google image, type in Reyes Lopez Tijerina, and Reyes is spelled differently. It's Reies. Lopez
Wow.
is with an S. Reyes Lopez Tijerina, and they call him King Tiger. And so this guy would go, and I think it was in the 60s, went to Tierra Amarilla in New Mexico, went to the land grant office. There's an office there that had all these ancient Spanish land grants that when the Spanish conquistadors came, they said, okay, we're going to section off this parcel of Texas or New Mexico at the time, this parcel or whatever. So he actually went in there with a few berets, shot up the courthouse, tried to arrest one of the district attorneys because he said, you know, I know the history. This land is supposed to be owned by the Chicano people. And there was actually a shootout. The National Guards came, they arrested him. You can actually see black and white pictures of tanks rolling through this little pueblo, this little city, Tierra Maria, New Mexico. And that's what brought him the fame. And then in the late 60s and early 70s, he worked a lot with Bobby Seale, with Huey P. Newton, and he would
Oh,
actually fly to Oakland. So if you ever see pictures of this really good looking young Chicano with a pompadour and the little black skinny tie, he almost looks like Richie Valens or something like that. That's Reyes
uh-huh.
Lopez Tijerina. And he was always surrounded by berets and panthers. And they
What,
called him King Tiger because he was a fierce advocate of grabbing the land and giving it back to the people.
well, you know
But
something, in a similar fashion, there was this brother named Dr. Jawia. He was an Attica brother. He was a Native American. His name was, well, his maiden name was John Hill. And he was doing work around in Colombia, you know, British Columbia. He was doing a lot of work with the Native Americans over there. And he was organizing the AIM people. And so he heard that George Bush was coming to Canada, and he came straight to Canada. And when George Bush was getting out his car, he ran to him. He said, "Now I'm arresting you. I'm arresting you." And the guys got, you know, because he got too close to George Bush, he wanted to arrest George Bush on murder. And that's good. I like that. And he got arrested. He went to jail, man. He did 2 years for that. You know, he did. But listen,
you
I
know,
gotta go, man. Love
thank
y'all.
you, Comrade Jorge, for being here. Thank you, Comrade.
Thank you.
Thank you, sister. Well,
Yeah,
we'll
thank you
talk
for
to you next
sharing your
time.
stories. Appreciate it.
All right, and as Comrade Jorge leaves, I'm gonna go ahead and continue. So we are on the bottom. If you're in the book, the bottom of page 133. One of the positive things that came from my time in boys' school was the improvement in my relationship with my biological father. Before getting locked up, I hadn't talked to him in nearly 2 years. Anytime he would call the house to speak to me, one of my other siblings would yell out, "Your father's on the phone," so he could never hear what I thought of him. There were times I would see him at the local park when we were playing pickup games, and I wouldn't say anything to him. But when I went to boys' school, he and my grandmother would come up and see me one weekend, and my mom and siblings the next. That's one thing I'm grateful for, to have an immediate family that stood by me the entire time I was in boys' school. Before I was released from boys' school, one of the local news outlets came down from the Indiana Boys' School to conduct an interview with me. If I remember correctly, there had been several incidents at high schools across Indianapolis where students had assaulted teachers. They wanted to do a story about this new phenomenon. I don't remember the entire interview verbatim. I just remember feeling that the woman who had interviewed me was full of shit and biased. I had never given an interview to any media outlet before. I initially gave them permission to interview me because I had wanted my side to be heard instead of that what was happening. I felt like she purposely got under my skin before the interview started. I remember her asking me all these ridiculous questions which seemed to imply that I was the bad guy and Mr. Marshall was an innocent victim of my aimless rage. When I asked her if she, when I asked her if she had done anything in her life that was considered bad, she told me that she hadn't. She said she had been a good kid for her entire life and always respected authority. I found that to be a complete lie. Instead of me ending that interview, I allowed it to continue, this time to be recorded. I don't think that was my best interview, to say the least. I was a kid who at times had a hard time capturing my thoughts intelligibly. I definitely wasn't prepared to answer questions from an experienced media journalist who wanted to paint me in an entirely different way, the way the news edited. They made me out to the way the news edited it, they made me out to be a crazy, violent teenager who needed to be sent away to boys' school. It wasn't until I went to prison and started learning the roles that certain institutions play within this capitalistic, imperialistic system that I came to view the media in its true light. There's no such thing as an objective media. All media serves a particular class interest. Depending upon the socioeconomic system one finds themselves under, during chattel slavery, the media served the class interests of the slave owners. This is why you will find old newspapers upholding the slave laws and reporting in a way that always upheld white supremacy. Man, that is so true now come to think of it. Today, the news media role is the same. They just serve the class interests of the capitalistic slave owners. This is why they normally report on anything the police say when they gun down a black or brown person unjustifiably in cold blood, then demonize a person's whole life. This is why when black and brown people come up missing, they will rarely place them in the news. But if the same happened to a rich white person, they will inform the whole nation they are missing. This is why they will advocate for new imperialistic wars, even though those wars are clearly based on fabrications. This all serves to uphold the white supremacy and the questionable right of the capitalistic, imperialistic class to carry out the types of policies they do domestically and abroad. The fact that they were never there, the fact that they were never there to learn why I had taken the steps I did that landed me in boys' school, but only to uphold the unquestionable authority of a school system, was all in accordance of how the media functions. I was a black, violent kid who attacked a white teacher who had only been doing his job. Damn, and that's how they played him out to be. Anything that paints black youth as predator, anything that paints black youths as predators and white people as mere victims of black rage reinforced white supremacy. And that's one of the main functions and roles of the media in this country. Let's say I was a rich white kid and this happened to me, especially if the teacher I had assaulted had been black. The class would have played an even bigger role. The headlines of that story very well could have been how our schools checks and balances are failing our most vulnerable students, or an honor roll student faces a year in boys' school. Just now, they would have headed the story, or what parts of it they would have emphasized would have been different if my ethnicity and class would have been, quote unquote, the right one. The way it would have struck the public's heartstrings would have made the public more sympathetic as to why I did what I did. The level of their investigation might have gone further and uncovered that the dean had failed to investigate the matter, and that I had even told him I was going to do it if he didn't take the situation seriously. There were many intervention points that could have been highlighted in how the school system had failed me. I'm sure the school system would have been chastised for failing to investigate the matter and allowing this to occur. If I was the mayor's son or some billionaire's kid, I could have been black and the teacher still white if I had a rich family behind me. But I had a double negative against me. I was black and I was part of the working class system. One of the things I'm almost proud about, one of the things I'm most proud about, though, is that I did receive all the credits I needed to graduate. In fact, I received enough credits to graduate from my original high school. I think part of the reason that Pike High School allowed me to graduate with their diploma was because they didn't want me back at their school. And I was cool with that. One of the best school teachers I ever had was one who had come across in boys' school. Mr. Sybil had done time before in prison himself. I think that's why he took his English class. I think that's why he took his English class so seriously. Most of the teachers at boys' school didn't really teach our classes shit. They functioned more like babysitters. They gave us paperwork and told us to read through the book. We could ask them questions, but you could feel that they really cared less if we passed their class or not. That's why I really had a lot of respect for Mr. Sybil. He took our education seriously. The way he taught gave me the foundation to write as I do today. I will forever be thankful to him for that. When December of 97 rolled around, I wanted to see the parole board. Despite the fights I had gotten into, I think I was able to procure 12 or 13 SATs, which made me eligible for release. Instead of leaving for college, I left from Cottage 4 to go home. The months before I had gotten fed up with going along with the program and flat out told the counselor in Cottage 5 that the group shit was bullshit. I told him that we would only then I told I told him that only I told that we only told him that what they wanted to hear and that none of that shit we did was really about rehabilitation. And it really wasn't. He didn't take too kindly to hearing me tell him all that, so he got me moved to cottage 4. He felt I was disrupting the harmony of the cottage. The way I saw it, I was telling him what everybody else felt, but he feared to hear me say. Cottage 4 was cool. They were less strict. I got into one fight in there, but it didn't stop me from going home. I don't know why in this passage I'm thinking of the movie They Live, and I'm thinking of Roddy Piper seeing aliens, and one of them's like, he can see us. It's literally what's happening. They didn't want to hear him because he's waking up, right?
Right.
When I finally walked out of the Indiana Boys School in the winter of '97, I knew I would be embarking upon an entirely different course. I had never been so bitter in my life. I planned on getting a job and everything, but I also had made it up in my mind that I wasn't going to complain about shit anymore. If I didn't have it, I would just take it from others. I left boys' school on some me against you world type of shit, you can say. Funny little tidbit about where I'm at, south of Portland, zombie, is Roddy Piper, the famous wrestler and actor, is from this area.
Oh, is he? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was an interesting chapter. After I think I told you, after I spent time out in Los Angeles, I went back to school to get a master's in criminal psychology because I really wanted to work in on the prevention side of stuff, right? I wanted to figure out how to help these kids and to keep them from getting involved in all of this stuff. And I never ended up getting into the prevention side, but and not a lot of people know this, Lobo. I worked in a correctional facility for 3.5 years. When
Mm.
I first moved back here to Indiana, I was the director of nursing at a county jail. And it certainly wasn't because I like cops. It was because I felt like the inmates deserved to have decent health care,
Yeah.
and I felt like that was something. So in Hawaii, we had a word, it's kuleana, and your kuleana is your mission. It's a combination of it's your mission, it's your responsibility, it's what you're supposed to be doing for other people.
Like a calling in
Right,
life. Ah,
exactly, like a
got it.
calling. So I felt like my kuleana was to provide health care, to help make sure that these inmates were getting decent health care.
Mm.
And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I loved the inmates. I didn't like the guards. I loved the inmates. when 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 I finally left there, under circumstances I will tell you about sometime, um, I missed the inmates way more than I missed anybody else, and I got to meet, my God, if we could reform our fucking prison system, dude, the next Einstein is in prison right now
Oh yeah. Oh
in
yeah,
this country.
100%.
The next Einstein, the next Picasso. I mean, some of these guys were so intelligent, and would tell me they'd come down for doctor's appointments and stuff, or nurse checks or whatever, and they would tell me the stories of their backgrounds and what they had been through as kids and stuff, and I'm like, how the fuck did anybody ever expect that you would end up anywhere but here? It was
Right.
so unfair. You know, it was
Right.
so unfair. And God, that whole system is just screwed. It's just screwed up.
No, I hear you, comrade. It's almost like this wheel, like there's like generational things, there's like class
Mhm.
struggle, there's, a little
Yep.
bit of racial things, and then it's like, when is it gonna stop churning, right? Like,
Right.
what
Right.
is it gonna take, right? Like, I
Right.
firmly believe, like exactly what you said, like there's probably some savant that's locked up somewhere. I mean,
Oh yeah.
anybody that can think of how to make a tattoo pen out of just a pencil and
Right.
a
That's
paper
what I
clip, like that's MacGyver in
I know,
person.
that's what I used to say too. I actually had well, I guess I'm not there anymore, so I can't get myself in trouble. I actually had a tattoo gun that one of the guys, I didn't realize he had carried it down with him on a medical, he was coming down to see the doctor, and he fucking hid it in the doctor's office. And I found it and I put it in my desk. And the next time he came down for his next doctor's visit, I walked in the room or it was a nurse check. He was getting his blood pressure checked. And I walked in the room to check his blood pressure. And he just kind of looked at me. And I kind of looked at him. And he had this look of what the fuck on his face, because I knew damn well that he had been looking for his tattoo gun.
You found his stash.
but but he couldn't say anything, right? He couldn't say to me, they always called me by my first name, Nurse, and then my first name. I'll say Nurse Zombie. But he looked at me, he couldn't look at me and go, Nurse Zombie, where's my tattoo gun? But I just kind of looked at him with my poker face and just kind of had my eyebrows raised, and I was like, what is there something you'd like to talk about? And he's like, no, Nurse Zombie, nothing at all, nothing at all. Well,
Yeah,
when I left there, I actually took I have the tattoo gun. He was one of my favorite inmates, and I was like, I'm gonna take this thing because it is.
nice.
They are a work of art, dude. I
Yeah,
mean, they are a
yeah.
work of art.
And not only that, it's unfortunate, but when you have time and you're
Yes.
not a sucker to capitalism and running the meetings and trying to feed the family, whatever, it's interesting to me. But like, if I have a problem, whether it's relationship or maybe even physical, like there was something going on with my garage door and I couldn't work on it, I couldn't figure out how to fix it. I remember hearing a family member having the same kind of issue and just talking to my nephew who's incarcerated about that. And then I
Yeah.
forgot. And then 2 weeks later, in this quick, crappy 15-minute phone call we get with him, he just blurts out, "Oh, yeah, remember we were talking about this? Have you thought about A, B, and C and trying to figure?"
Right.
And it worked. And I was like,
Here's
"Holy
what you got
hell,
to
he's
do,
been,
Uncle. Here's what you got
yeah,
to do, Uncle.
yeah." He had,
Yep.
so you can tell he was sitting there thinking about it
Yep.
and like
Yep.
trying to like honestly work it out. And I'm like, here we're talking about lean management. That's fucking lean. They got it.
Right.
Like we can
Right.
learn from them,
Right. Well, and I think oh, excuse me, still trying to get over that flu cough. I think what people don't realize, like we were talking about earlier, people just want them locked up. They just don't want them in their
Yeah.
faces because
Yeah.
then they don't have to acknowledge the systemic problems that exist that cause us to have 25% of the world's prisoners,
God, that is so
in this
crazy.
country. And they don't want to look at those systemic issues. They would rather just lock them up, pretend it doesn't exist. But what they don't understand is a lot of these prisoners that are currently locked up, they are coming home. They are coming home to your neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Don't you want them rehabilitated? Don't you want them to be able to be productive, happy members of society. You know, the system doesn't. We already know the system doesn't, you know, but one would think that the other people in society would want to know that this person has been given every opportunity to turn their life around. And it boggles my mind. It does. It
That's a
just,
good point, because you would think that like the general population would want that, but honestly, as dirty as it sounds, comrade, I think you're right. I think the masses, the unawoken masses, it's easier
mm-hmm,
for them to just throw people away. I
right,
mean, and we're
right,
not even talking about cancel culture. I'm just talking in general. It's easy to
right.
just
No,
displace what's going on, worry about your own little nine to
yep,
five, and
yep,
then that's it. And they forget the bigger picture is
yep,
you work in that little nine to five. Something, heaven forbid, may happen to you, and now you're part of that,
right,
right?
right. Well, and I think part of it though is if you really, you know, we we have our eyes open. We realize the depth of the problem. But for the average, I don't like to call them the, what did you call them? The something masses?
The
What'd you call them?
unawoken.
No, I call them the unwashed.
Yeah,
but
right.
but but for the unawoken masses, um, you know, they don't want to look at the fact that every it all ties back to poverty. It all ties back to poverty, racism, and inequity. And until we solve those things, you know, they're like, oh, lock them up, take away their freedom, do this, do that. It's not fixing it. It's
Mhm.
a damn band aid.
Right,
It is a
right,
damn band aid. And nothing is ever going to change
right.
until we change the root cause of everything that's going on, you know? And that is so overwhelming for some of them that they can't even look at it.
I think that's exactly what it is, comrade. Or if it's not overwhelming, it's like scary, like, oh my
Yeah,
gosh, right?
yeah, yeah,
And then out of fear, they just, "Oh, I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to deal
yeah.
with it."
Oh, we can't. Oh, no, 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 no. I can't do that. We can't do that. You
Hmm.
know, and a
Hmm.
lot of it. I mean, you know, speaking from speaking from a white point of view, I'm pretty familiar with you know, fucking white men. Jesus. Um, and you know they can't. I mean, oh, what do you mean it's because of inequity? No, they're just lazy. They just want to take the easy way out because they cannot admit that there is systemic racism and that the white privilege exists. They cannot admit those things
Mm,
because to admit those things is to question their entire life.
mm. And then
It
to question
literally,
them.
yes,
Mm,
it is literally to question their entire life because
mm,
they have to believe that they made it through their own hard work and sweat, you know,
mm,
and that they
mhm.
worked for everything they have. They don't realize that, yeah, some of that may be true, but you also didn't have it harder because of the
Yeah,
color of your skin.
yeah, right.
So they will never admit that we could solve all of these issues. We could solve all of these issues if we would just stop with the fucking racism and the inequity and the do something about poverty. Lift people up
For
instead of
real.
locking them up. Instead of locking them up, lift them up.
For real. I remember reading books on the early communist-based unions of like rail workers and coal miners. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people don't know that the very first original coal miners were children, little
Yeah, yeah,
kids. And I remember thinking, my God, and I mean, And you know, in the hills of Appalachia, there were little white kids, and I remember thinking, my God, like poverty truly is that one beast of being that we all have in common when it comes to the class struggle. Because
Yeah.
me being a Chicano, or in these day and age, people like saying Latinx, having I have a lot more in common than I do with a poor white person than I do with somebody who's made it and then they forget their roots or
Right.
they get whitewashed. Like
Right.
that class struggle, it sucks. But with poverty, you can see it in pictures. It's weird. You know, the Native Americans have a saying, and I've learned that a lot of the reasons why a lot of tribes didn't like taking pictures is because their
Hi,
saying was that,
Anna.
Sister Anna, how you doing? Their saying and their belief was that the eyes capture the soul. And what's
Mm-hmm.
interesting about that is if you look at old pictures of old like coal miners, little white kids working in coal
Mm-hmm.
mines, and then you look at residential Indian pictures of children,
Yes.
and you even look at pictures nowadays of these poor kids in ICE facilities, and you just zoom in the eyes, and they're all the same.
They're all
It's
blank.
all despair. It's blank.
Yes, their
It's
eyes
all
are
fucking
empty.
despair. It's
Their
empty.
eyes are empty.
And I
Yep.
think you're right, comrade. If we can
Yep.
kill that beast of that evil seed of poverty,
Yep.
then you know, oh my gosh, then you know the gloves are off. Let's take it on. Then
Right.
capitalism doesn't have any hold against us, because I honestly think that poverty, generally speaking, is weaponized.
Oh,
Capitalism
absolutely.
weaponizes it, and that's one way that
Absolutely.
you know it's
Yep.
triumphant. You know,
Yep. Absolutely. And that gap every every year when that wealth gap gets
Mm,
wider and wider and wider, the number of us who are considered to be, it's not even just poverty, it's just not being in the 10%, you
right.
know, not being in that top 10% of wage earners. I mean, you got
Right.
to be, I think we read something the other night. To be in the top 10% of wage earners in this country, you got to make over $500,000 a year.
That's crazy.
Even when I had my best job, that would have taken me 7 years, you know, and it's just that gap is widening and widening and widening. It drives Lobo, I'm not kidding you, it drives me crazy. Dude, I sit here and I am like, what the fuck is wrong with people? There are
Yeah.
so many more of us than there are of them.
But you know
When
what
is
I
enough
think,
gonna be
comrade?
enough?
I think they fall sucker to that brainwash scheme, because I've seen it even in my own community where, you know, kudos, somebody works hard and maybe they grab a small mom and pop business and now they open two or three businesses. And I remember having conversations, and it's like, it's almost like the Cubans in Miami going to becoming Trump supporters. Like the
Right.
minute they land in Florida, that's all pro Republican and Trump. And I'm like, what? Of
Yeah.
course, we know that Democrats won't save us as well either.
Oh,
But
hell no.
I think what happens is I think people fall victim to just living in blinders, and it's just
Yep.
me, and
Yep.
whatever I have to do to to propagate my own
Yep.
means, my own mission, my own calling. Screw
Yep.
everybody else, and I'm going to do that. And I think capitalism just uses that and
Oh,
just
it's
loves
terrible.
that.
Yeah. Yep.
Capitalism is the leech, and when you play
Yeah.
victim to that, you're just a big fat tomato, and they're like, "Oh, here we go. We're gonna just suck the juice and suck the life out of you."
Right.
That's how it
Well,
seems, anyways.
and it's like this right now. It's like what we're doing. They do not want this to happen.
Right. Right.
I mean, look what they did. Look what they did to brother Fred and
Yeah.
all of them in Chicago. They do not want this to happen. They do
Right.
not want black people and brown people and white people and native, indigenous people. They do not want us talking. They do
Right.
not want us figuring this out and
Right.
figuring out that we have way more in common. I think part of the problem, one of the things I see with these white men, is they think I heard the best line. Somebody said, you are not a temporarily um displaced billionaire. Okay. You are
Oh,
not. You are not a temporarily displaced billionaire. You have far more in common with your poor Black and brown brothers and sisters
right,
than you will ever have with a billionaire.
right.
So, wrap your head around that idea and figure out that that's where the solutions start.
Class
Sister Anna,
solidarity, that's what it's all about, you know.
Sister Anna, were you talking? You're muted, hun. You're muted.
Oh, yeah, you're muted, Sister Anna, if you want to say something.
I know she's at work.
I saw her mouth moving for a minute.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Class solidarity, though, I mean, I honestly feel like that's one of the reasons why Chairman Fred Hampton was assassinated. Because I mean, and he was doing that in the '60s. Class
I know.
solidarity is going to be the thing that
Yep.
brings us together to understand intersectionality. And then once you
Yeah.
have those two together, I mean, you're only missing three other fingers to make a whole fist.
Right. Right.
You know,
But we
once we have that
gotta,
fist gone, I mean, it's gloves
yeah.
are off. Then we could sock it to him, literally.
Yeah. I mean, I I go off every once in a while in our group chats and stuff, and I'm like, what are we waiting for? How much worse does it have to get?
Really, really.
What are we waiting for? I mean, come on. And yeah, and they're like, just calm down, zombie. Just calm down. I'm like, look, I'm old, damn it. I don't have that much more time to fight.
I'm hopeful that if not in my lifetime, my children's lifetime, there would be such a dramatic change that people will look back on organizations like the
Yeah,
Second Rainbow Coalition and be like, they were one of the first to do it. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
that's what keeps
yeah,
us going.
yeah. Well, and I mean that's why I do what I do. I mean, I have a video on my TikTok where I am very clearly, my face is right there. And I don't care anymore. I don't care because I have to leave here, be it naturally or whatever. I have to leave here knowing that I did something to make it better for my grandchildren and everyone else's grandchildren.
Mm,
I have to,
mhm,
because what good are we if we don't?
yeah. Then you're
You
just
know?
being a part of the problem.
Yeah. I mean, what good are we if we don't?
Mm,
To bury your head in the sand. Silence is consent.
it's complicit, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, silence. There it is. I couldn't think of the word.
Mm-hmm.
Silence
Mm-hmm.
is being complicit. It's
Mm-hmm.
complicity.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I can't do it anymore.
I'm
You
with
know,
you, sister. I'm
yeah,
with you 100%.
yeah, I can't do it anymore. Yeah, I'm going to contact you because I see your little thing. So, were you guys really the first ones to open carry?
So in Oregon, we were the first ones to come together as Brown Berets. There had been a couple of other anti-fascist comrades that would open carry, but when we heard the Proud Boys were coming to this all-black neighborhood
No, fuck those
in
turds.
Portland, yeah, we made an agreement with the Panthers. We were like, if they're going to black neighborhoods, who do you think is next? We
That's
gotta go
right.
get them illegals. And then
That's right.
once that came into fruition, there used to be some really cool comrades, some LGBTQIA plus comrades called the Pink Pistols. I think that's what they're
Yeah, that's
called,
what you were
rifles or
saying.
something like that.
Yeah,
And so we all came together and yeah, we open carried
that is so
directly.
badass.
We saw this parade coming down and they were all with their MAGA flyers and all that. And it's funny, I've never seen so many black people with AR-15s and AK-47s. And it was just me and my unit of berets. And, you know, I think I had a shotgun. I don't even think I had my AR yet. I had a shotgun and a handgun. Somebody else had a shotgun. And so we were like, let's do it, because what we're going to do for you all in the Black community, we understand that you would reciprocate that in the
Right.
Chicano community. And so we had that understanding and that solidarity. And we literally saw them coming down Martin Luther King, MLK Boulevard, and they saw us and they stopped and they did an about face. And what's funny is one guy in the parade, I don't think he got the message, or he couldn't turn around in time. And he had this shitty old pickup and he stalled in front of us. And
Oh
we were
my
just
God.
looking at him. And I think he must have had an out of body experience. He was whiter than the sheet, trying to get his truck going. And he just hightailed it out of there. And we were just laughing.
Well,
And
now
then
hold on, Lobo. It was the Proud Boys. Are you sure it wasn't a sheet?
Very true. Very true. But what's funny is I remember seeing PPB, Portland Police Bureau, coming down.
Well,
And I
they're about
remember they were coming
worthless.
down in, like, it looked like a fucking tank. It was like part of their SWAT. And I
Yeah.
remember one of them having like a Pittsburgh, whatever the Proud Boy symbol is. And I was like, oh, hell no. Here they come. Now they're coming to law enforcement. Like, they were smart, because we
Yep.
could run off their protesters. But now law enforcement, we're going to have to know, you know, where are the ACLU
Yeah.
legal servers? We're going to have to know the Oregon Constitution in terms of carrying firearms and
Yeah.
so forth.
Yeah.
And what's funny is there was a call on the radio, and we all formed up a line, and I think PBB saw that and they turned right around.
Nice.
And
Nice.
that was one of the best times of my
Nice.
revolutionary life.
Yeah.
It was
Well, like
very
I was
fulfilling.
watching some of the actions. I was really disappointed in the lack of actions after the Tyree Nichols videos
Yeah.
came out.
Same.
Really disappointed.
Same.
And, you know, I'm like, okay, fine. You want to be a revolutionary, but you can't be a revolutionary because it's too fucking cold. Really?
Right.
You know,
Right.
okay. Or it's raining. Okay, whatever.
Right.
Yeah, so I was very disappointed. But there was one, I think it was in New York City, and this kid got up on a police car and was breaking out the windshield, was kicking out the windshield with his feet. And about 3 or 4 cops came running up and grabbed him. And I was so fucking happy to see they grabbed him off the front of that car. And all of a sudden, all the rest of the protesters just closed in.
Nice.
And we call it de-arresting. You know, they de-arrested him because they just closed in and swamped those cops and grabbed the protester and went off with him. You know,
Nice.
yeah, they
Nice.
basically de-arrested him. So,
Nice.
you know,
Nice.
but that's the kind of shit. I mean, come on, you
Yeah,
know,
there's definitely tactics.
yeah. I mean, there's so many more of us than there are of them. Even if you cut out half, the population. They're too old. They don't care. They're Christo-fascist, whatever. Cut out half the population. That's still 150 million of us.
Right.
You know, and yeah, that's my biggest frustration.
No, I'm with you. I think that's what the 99% want, is
Yep.
because they know they're outnumbered.
Yep.
So they want us to be divided on all kinds of issues. Because if we're divided, we're easily more conquerable, right? Divide and conquer, right?
And they keep locking, you know, they don't want all of us talking, and they want the, you know, they're so scared. They're so scared that white is going to become the minority. So what do they
Right.
so what do? They are so scared that white is going to become the minority that what do? They continue to lock up black and brown people at ridiculous rates, you know, and it starts with what Kwame went through in boys' school.
Yeah, right.
You know,
right.
Once you are at that point, even if it is, and a lot of times, you know, it's because it's bullshit reasons. You know, it's bullshit reasons. Things that black and brown kids get locked up for, a white kid would never get locked up for.
Yeah, look at what Brother Jorge was saying, a whole damn year just for kicking out a cop's windshield. The thing, obviously we know that Republican, Democrat, and just laws in general are going to serve the working class. But one thing that I do fear is, I guess, with the pandemic or whatever, there have been a lot less public defenders than usual. And that scares the hell out of me, because not that you're getting the best with a public defender, but shit, at least
Right.
you were getting something. And now
You
you
were
don't
getting
even have that.
something. Yep. Yep. Well, and they were so overworked. I mean, grossly overworked to begin with. And now there's even less of them,
Right.
but yeah, I mean, the system, I got into this argument on TikTok the other night with this guy who was saying, excuse me, was saying there is no such thing as systemic racism anymore. And I'm like, what?
That alone propagates it.
Right. And of course it was a white guy. And I'm like, what? And he goes, well, there are no laws that are specifically written that are racist against one particular race. And I said, you just don't even get it, do you? Do you understand that it doesn't have to be in black and white on a piece of paper for it to happen? And he's like, oh, it just doesn't exist. It just doesn't exist. I finally stopped talking to him because I was like, I'm gonna get a bump in the middle of my forehead from banging my head against this brick wall. But
Yep. And that's the thing, is there comes a point where you just can't talk. You can't persuade anybody. So then you just got to stay the road and stay the path. That's one of the reasons why we were so very forceful with fascists and Proud Boys and all that, because I remember trying to talk to them like, why do you guys hate gay people? Like, they're the coolest people. Why do you hate me? I'm not illegal. I was born here, and this actually used to be half of my country. Like, why do you? And they were just so brainwashed that you couldn't talk to them. And then when I found out that just because of Donald Trump, they were marching in a predominantly black neighborhood, and that particular neighborhood near Geneva's hair salon, that's what it was called, near Geneva's hair salon, had a lot of older black residents. That hurt my heart, because I was like, oh, you're not going to go into the hood and march up against teenagers, 20 and 30 year olds. You're going to pick on the elders. No. And so we were especially forceful. But what's funny is, ever since then, like, that whole fear factor, I mean, we rarely even go into Portland anymore. We do. It's like Moses parting the waves. People will literally run from us. And that's probably maybe a good thing, but
that's okay.
At some point, like, I remember talking to Mayuda, and I remember thinking, there's no conversing. We've tried the peaceful means, and we have to protect our community and our comrades, and other communities that share solidarity with us. And this is the only way to do it. And so that's what came to fruition.
Well, and it's like what Kwame said in that chapter about the media. You see it in the media when it's a white kid. Do you remember that white swimmer from, I think he was from Stanford or something, that sexually assaulted the girl behind the dumpster?
She was passed out. He raped her. Yeah.
Dude did 3 months. He did 3 months. He was sentenced to only 6. And the whole thing in the newspaper was like, oh, well, we don't want to hurt he's a college student, he's a good athlete.
What about that poor young lady?
Exactly.
And the trauma she's carrying.
Exactly.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think she was white too. Like,
she was.
What about her?
But that doesn't even matter. Okay, I don't want to, please don't take that the wrong way. Absolutely, what she went through matters, but it doesn't matter what color his victim was.
Right.
What matters is, if that had been a black or brown young man who did that, they would be gone for life.
Yeah, 100%.
They would be gone for life. And people don't want to face the fact that that is reality with our current justice system. That is reality. I hate, they laugh at me all the time because I'm like, God, I hate white people. And they're like, Zombie, you do know that you are a white people, right? And I said,
but to piggyback off what you're saying, it's not really I mean, it is race, but it's also the whole class. Because
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken, yeah, he was a famous swimmer and all that, but he
He
came
was
from a
also very
more
well off.
he
Yes.
came from a more affluent
Yes.
family. As a matter of fact, there was actually somebody, this young rich white kid, that I remember they used the word affluenza in his case.
Affluenza. Yep.
Remember that one?
Yep.
Because he
Yep.
was so privileged in his lifestyle, he didn't know he was doing wrong.
Yep.
Like, are you kidding me?
But you can
You
see
know?
it. I mean, you can see it so much in the media, you know, and just what they do. I mean, you know, he was a Stanford athlete. He had great grades. He was this, he was that. And Tyree Nichols, you know, rest his soul, got beat to fucking death.
Mm,
And what's the first thing that people start? Well, he shouldn't have run. He shouldn't have done this. Oh, he was doing this. Does he have a criminal record? You know, and they're trying to disparage this poor guy who just got beat to death,
right,
you know,
right.
where if he had been a white victim, oh my God, dude, you know, it,
Beverly Hills would be on fire.
oh my God. Yeah. You know, and I'm disappointed that more wasn't done when those videos came out, because I think it's just, it's overload. It's every day. There's a page on Twitter. I run our group Twitter account. So unfortunately, I'm on there off and on all day long. And it gets so overwhelming sometimes that I'm like, I got to put this down, because there's a page on there. It's called Incarceration instead of incarceration. It's called Incarceration. And they talk to people all over the country, and they track all of the cop related deaths in this country, like shootings, in deaths that occur in custody, or um chase deaths, you know, like when they're doing a car chase. We are averaging 8 a day, Lobo.
Crazy.
8 a day.
Oh, that's so
You
gross.
know, and I just think people are getting so overwhelmed, because you can't even deal with hearing about one of them, and you're already hearing about the next one,
Yeah,
you know, and then
yeah,
the next one, and then the next one, and I'm like, what? Like I said, when is it going to be enough?
yeah, yeah. Good
When is
point.
it going to be enough, you know? uh, well, thank you so much. This has been a fantastic conversation.
Yes, it has been, and that is the end of our chapter. I look forward to hearing what the next chapter brings, because the cool thing, and I've mentioned this to Kwame before, the cool thing about his book is, you know, even though it was written in the past tense on what he experienced to lead him up to the individual he is now, almost everything in the book is relatable to present day issues, which
Yes.
that might be kind of scary, but it sparks really interesting conversations, you know?
Yes. Yes. Well, and it just shows us that we still have a lot of work to do,
Definitely. And a lot
you
of
know?
learning to do too. I,
Yeah. A
I
lot of
I
work.
have to say, after every conversation and book reading, I always walk away with at least one or two things that I've learned.
Yeah.
And he mentioned some passages in this chapter, you know, akin to chattel slavery
Yep.
and different things of slavery. And you know, I learned some stuff, and I actually just recently learned, and this is probably already public knowledge to most of the comrades here, that the very first slave catchers had a badge, and that straight up looks like a sheriff's badge or an officer's
Yeah.
badge that
Yeah.
cops wear nowadays. And with the 13th Amendment, we now know it never went away.
Yeah. No, it didn't. And that's, I mean, that is basically what our modern day policing grew out of,
Right,
was the slave catchers,
right.
you
So it's
know?
already
And
rooted and based in white supremacy.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Right, right.
Yeah.
It's funny because white supremacy really is a false ideology, right? That you're just better than one person because of the tone of your skin or whatever. And that's
Right.
just one of the little premises of white supremacy. And what's interesting is with modern day police and actually maybe even military culture, that thin blue line flag, when I see that thin blue line flag, I see a Nazi flag. I see
Yes.
a white sheet. Like to
Yes.
me, they're the same.
Yes. Yes. Well, and it's interesting, the whole way that the Tyree Nichols case was handled is, everybody was like, well, look, they're holding them accountable, they're doing what's supposed to be done. Okay. Do you want to know why? Because all five of those officers were black. If
Right.
all five of those officers had been, well, now it's up to like 7 or 8, I think.
Yeah,
One of
right.
which, one of them was finally the white guy. But if all of them had been white, they would be on administrative paid leave and they would still be investigating. So I think that was a real reality check for a lot of black officers around the country, because
Right.
you are not only a class traitor, you are a race traitor.
That's
Because if the
right.
shit hits the fan, they are gonna get rid of you just as fast as they damn well can.
That's exactly right.
And that is the only reason why all of that happened so fast. That is the only reason, is because those officers were black.
I agree 100%, comrade. I agree 100%. I have always not been a proponent of law enforcement. I've
Ugh.
always disliked them for many reasons, but for the naysayers that say, "Oh, he should have just, you know, done what he was being told. He should have just not resisted or whatever," they forget that there's video of poor Elijah McClain in Colorado, who is a
Yeah.
very nice, very humble young black man, and he did everything they told him. And
Yep.
with his precious self, and him just saying, I'm a little bit different, have anxiety, this and that, they still
Right.
fucking murdered him. They
Right.
still fucking murdered him.
Right. Well,
So
and Philando Castile.
Philando Castillo,
Philando Castile.
prime example.
Very, very, very honorable, intelligent, well-respected young man who was legally carrying a firearm.
Right. Told the officer, I don't want to brandish it. I'm trying to show you.
Right.
And was shot with his girlfriend's daughter right behind him. That
Right.
bullet could have struck that little girl.
Right. Right. But I don't
And
know.
well respected in his community. He worked in the
Yep.
cafeteria. He worked in the schools. And
Yep.
speaking of class traitors, let us not forget that the cop that shot him was a brown man. Geronimo, God, I forgot his last name. He was half Filipino, half Mexican. Shot Philando
Yeah.
Castile. So to me, in terms of like military or especially law enforcement, once you go to that thin blue line, you are a race traitor.
Well, I said the other night in a live, I said once you join that gang, once you become one of them, your race is no longer black or white, it is blue.
That's right.
It is blue.
That's right. That's 100% right.
No,
Not only is your race blue, but your religion is now capitalism, because everything that law enforcement does upholds the ideology of capitalism.
No, absolutely.
Like I've actually personally heard of stories here in Portland where, oh, the police are so understaffed and they're so defunded, and there's like
Bullshit.
heinous crimes happening, and the pigs won't show up. But if you're a business owner, like if Intel calls up and says, "Hey, we got this Mexican asleep in our parking lot. We don't know what's going on,"
Right.
they will show up with a fucking SWAT team.
Right. Right. That's because they started off as slave traders, and they are completely beholden to their capitalistic owners.
I agree.
They are completely beholden. They're not, well, the goddamn Supreme Court. The goddamn Supreme Court told them that they do not have to protect us.
That's right.
That they do
That's
not
right.
they do not have the duty to protect. They don't protect us. They fucking kill us. They protect
Businesses and
property.
corporations now have more rights than we do as
Yes.
human beings. How
Yes.
disgusting is that?
They protect property, you know? And I'll tell you, the entire system. I get so angry when I talk to people who are like, well, but reform, we could no, you
I
can't.
don't think you can reform that. You'd have to abolish it and build from the ground up all over again.
You can't reform policing, and you can't reform the prison system.
Right.
You know, you cannot. So, you know, I am happy for the 3.5 years that I worked in corrections, because I felt like I was doing something for the inmates. You know, I was not I was not there to uphold the system. I was not there to try to fix the system. I was there to provide medical care, good, decent medical care to the inmates. And I feel like I did that. You know, I was well respected. Some of them were actually scared of me. It was kind of fun. It was kind of funny. I remember, quick story, and then I'm gonna get off of here. I would not allow them to disrespect my nurses, right? And because everything in that system is about respect. And just because you're here doesn't mean that you have lost your respectability. You know, you still deserve respect. And so I demanded that they respect my nurses. So, oh boy, stop it, guys. So I heard that one of the newer guys who hadn't been there very much had said something. Hey, stop. Oh, I'm so sorry. Had said something nasty to one of my nurses. So I got one of the guards and I'm like, look, I need to go down here to A Slice. And he's like, all right. So we go down there and I have him pull up this guy out into the hallway with me. And I look up at him. I'm like 5'5", right? And I weigh like, well, now I'm not going to tell you what I weigh, but at the time I weighed about 130 pounds. So I look up at this guy and he's like 6'6". And I put my finger in his face and I'm like, don't you ever speak to my nurse that way again. And he just kind of looked down at me and I said, am I making myself clear? Do not ever speak to my nurse that way again. And he looked down at me and he's like, okay, Nurse Zombie, I'm sorry. You know, and we walked away and the guard goes, do you know who that is? And I said, no. And he said, do you know why he's here? I said, no. And he's like, he's here on like double murder charges. I said, I don't give a fuck. He's going to respect my nurses.
But you approached him in a humanistic way.
That's right. That's right. And from that day forward, every time I walked down into that slice, somebody would go, oh, somebody's in trouble. Nurse Zombie's here. But, you know, I loved those guys. I did. I loved them. And I knew, you know what, the last thing I want to say, I knew that if shit ever popped off in that place, that we had a massive failure and all the doors came unlocked and everybody got out, I would be more protected by the inmates than I would have by the guards, because the guards would have been worrying about themselves.
Oh, you better believe it. Interesting. All right. Well, thank you, Comrade Zombie. That's very enlightening. It's actually refreshing to hear that your point of view. And that wraps it up for this chapter. We'll do it again next Monday. Next Monday, I'll have somebody speaking on my behalf, as I'll be in Miami, and then we'll keep doing it again every Monday. Thank you all for being here.
Nice.
And as usual, all power to the people.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lobo. All power to the people.
Of course, of course.
Thank you, Anna.
That's right. We see you. We see you,
we see
Comrade
you.
Anna. There you go. All
We
power
see
to the
you.
people.
You having an okay night at work?
Good.
Good.
All right. We'll see you all next week.
All right.
So
Good night.
good night, comrades. So, Comrade Shamako, whenever you're ready to end it, let's do it.
Copy.
All right. You all have a good night.